monitor engineering, it's like, okay, I'm doing this specifically for this person and what their preferences are. Like at front of house, you're balancing one or two mixes. When you're at monitor, you're balancing.
Oh, I can't spend the nose. Oh, can you tell me how?
What do you say you're doing?
Did you see it?
What's the second front of house?
If you're working at like a lower,
Black stopping by. Take him to him, baby.
it might be a this video I have a broadcast. It's
Take him up again. Oh, can you tell me who? Yeah.
Roasted for that. Hold on.
Jake Richter, the one man who's going to advertise his LinkedIn on this show. What the hell? What's going on with you?
I did find my my Instagram handle. It is Jake Cricket Audio. Jake underscore
No.
Cricket underscore audio.
How did someone take this from you?
Well, someone had done. So Jake's like a super common name, and there's yeah, and there's even like Jake Richters who are other mixing engineers, and Jake Richters who are live sound engineers. They're like a lot of them are from Europe or whatever or something. But like, yeah, that name has been a little bit weird. So I say Cricket all the time just to help identify a little bit better.
Is there a root stem of cricket? Why are you called that?
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a silly, goofy story. It's not like crazy funny or anything, but I used to play in a band, and you know I don't play a whole lot anymore. But when I was playing, I was always jumping when I was playing.
Yeah,
and you know I had and I got really into it. I made sure that I had straps, and I made sure I had instruments that were close to my chest, so it was okay for me to jump and play and all that stuff. And
yeah,
I actually practiced jumping like in time so that my feet left the ground and came on the ground in time, which is actually a little bit tricky to kind of do.
Yeah, you got to gauge your height pretty good.
Yeah,
you know,
so,
120 is not the only.
So I was really into that. So and back then I was called Cricket because I would jump on the but that's it. And in all honesty, it was just after that a marketing term, like, okay,
yeah,
that's a name people can identify me with and remember that one. So that's what people kind of stuck with. I'm like, okay, cool, nice, easy identifier. Because you say Jake, and you know there's a ton of Jakes in town, and there's even other Jake audio engineers, and
there's enough regulars. Now, in that experience, what strap locks did you end on that are the end all be all?
So actually, at the time, I went to. I can't remember the guy's name. It's not Justin Kennedy. He's like the one that everyone goes to. But I went to a luthier and like told him what I was doing, and they actually had made it so that the holes going in the guitar were deeper and like longer threads. And I think they were Ernie Ball strap locks or something, and they went on the end. And then I had a very, I had like it wasn't leather, but it was similar leather with like fluffy coating or something. And it looked like it's just a black guitar strap, but it was like leather with fluffy stuff over it. And that like had not too much stretch so that when I landed, it wouldn't go bloop, bloop every time, but it would stay like in a consistent spot and everything. I've gotten rid of all that gear now, but because now I just play sitting down, if anything. So I'm the opposite of a Cricket, I guess.
No, that's not true. Your legs still rub together and give some kind of high frequency pitch. I mean, it's just part. I had a buddy that, the Bell and the Bear up in Montgomery.
Yes.
Great club. They have a killer Thursday night open jam, which is like just like an incestuous jam of like the 15 best cover bands of like that era of musicians. Like it goes pretty fucking hard. I really enjoy it. But I picked up my buddy, I think his name's Kevin. I'm spacing his name for some reason. And he had like a truly elastic guitar strap. And like, yeah, exactly.
A rubber band.
It could get some pounce on it if you wanted to. And I never experienced that, but two, like that, I need something that's gonna rock with me. I don't need that kind of thing. So I'm fighting, holding on to this guitar. It's like I'm trying to hold a python out of a PetSmart. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like I got no chance with this shit. Well, Jake, before we proceed any further, what's the latest title of all the work that you put in for your education, whatnot.
So my email.
Yeah,
at the bottom of my email.
Give me that verbatim.
It says educator, a list of colleges that I teach at. It says mixing and editing engineer. I had to put editing because film, like, some people just want things to be like cut up. They don't really want things to be mixed or whatever. So I put mixing / post-production on the bottom, and then after that I put recording it and live sound engineer, which really I'm thinking about changing to be recording and mixing engineer and getting rid of the post or whatever. But that's what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Is educator, recording, mixing, and live sound. Yeah, let's kind of go with that.
Yeah. And in that kind of order of operations, with educator being at the top, you've taken on a lot more of that kind of gig and the amount of time that you put into it. What would you say you miss the most of your more casual musical ventures that you've had to put aside because of that?
Well, here's the reason I went into the whole teaching thing, is actually not to turn your question on its own head, is that I could continue doing that stuff. So I really don't miss a whole lot of it. I freelance a lot less now, but I still can freelance a healthy amount while maintaining a teaching schedule. And I don't want to get in too much of people's crosshairs, but I get uncomfortable when we have educators who don't continue to work in the field. So I like to make sure that I'm still working in the field while I'm teaching.
It doesn't seem like it I've never gone through a music college, and I don't know what that's exactly like, but that doesn't feel like the type of field where academics go straight from their own degree into giving those degrees. You know, it's...
Well, for me, it kind of did. I started teaching right after I got my bachelor's, which is really early. Most people need a master's or something. Luckily, I had a lot of work experience while I was in college, and I worked with some pretty notable gigs and that kind of thing, and that got the attention of the college I went to, which was University of Cincinnati. And they needed someone to teach their freshmen, and I didn't do that per se, but I helped a lot of freshmen when I was a senior and a super senior, because I went to school for 5 years.
Super senior.
Yeah. And I was already helping, oh, you're having trouble with this chorus, here's what's going on with that. Mostly for, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but mostly for the technology side. Not music composition, not music theory. That, to be completely blunt, that's not my area of expertise by any means. I know enough to get in trouble. But for technology, I'm really comfortable giving advice on that. So I was doing that, and then they needed someone to teach a freshman level chorus, and I've always wanted to teach. So I volunteered and said, I'd love to do it if you'll have me. I know my qualifications from an academia standpoint are low, but if you'll have me, I'll do it. And they eventually were just like, yeah, sure, you can teach a section. And then I taught a section. I was fortunate enough to get some raving good student reviews. So then they said, oh, we'll have you teach more sections. So that's kind of how that started. Yeah. But to answer your original question, I really haven't had to give up a whole lot. I had to take away a lot of gigs, but I still freelance as much as I can. And now I freelance less though, because now I'm trying to balance family stuff and that too. So that's been a little bit of a different mindset too.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that a lot of folks in our profession kind of lack that you do very intentionally and inconsiderably is look objectively at your gigs and say why you would want to keep and why you'd be willing to lose those gigs, and continue to kind of move through the market. Because in a place where nothing's guaranteed, it's scary to walk away from a gig to pursue the next one. But since I've known you, it's always been on to the next. I'll keep this because I love it. This one didn't do this thing, and I can make that objective because it's so personal.
Yeah.
You know?
From a selfish point of view, it's really just gathering as many baskets as you can, right? Your eggs are the hours you have in a day, or we'll say in a week, and your different baskets are what can I put these eggs into to make money and also make happiness too? That's a whole different conversation. But you want to balance these right? So then let's say you do a gig somewhere. Well, you added a basket, and then you're like, well, I was holding some eggs, but I get more eggs in this basket. So you throw that basket out and you bring another one in and you keep that one, right?
Yeah.
That's that's why if you look at my, and there's nothing wrong with these companies. This just wasn't what I needed at the time. But I was a production manager at a few different places. If you look at my LinkedIn, I've hopped a little bit.
Quit plugging your LinkedIn.
But,
What the hell, Jake?
But I hop a few different places, but you know, people think I'm a job hopper, but then they see like you worked at the same church for like 7 to 8 years. It's like, well, yeah, that's a good basket. I kept that one.
Yeah.
And then they'll say like, well, you kept doing the studio thing for X amount of years. Well, yeah, it's a good basket. That's fun and makes money. So I did that one.
Yeah.
So it's not some. It's just I love the production management. I still do it on a freelance basis, but it's just not something that I wanted to put 40 hours a week into every week, right? Like it's just, I wanted to be a smaller basket than that, so that's why I started my own company, the Simple Sound Rentals, and that.
Yeah, and tell us what Simple Sound Rentals does.
Well, it's a range of things, but 99% of it, I have a bunch of powered speakers and PA systems and mixers. People rent them, and that's as little as, you know. You and I have a good friend, John. That's as little as him calling up and saying, I want to have some speakers for this band I work for. Okay, great. This much is how much it costs. Come and pick them up. You know, that's to a point where I'm not even like involved in the handoff.
Yeah.
And then it's like wedding couples who they don't want to hire a DJ or anything. They're just like, we're keeping our wedding on the cheap.
Playlist.
We want to playlist it.
Yeah.
Do you have a sound system? Yeah, here's a couple of options. To as much as, hey, we have this festival, we have like 10 bands, can you facilitate this? And at that point I get labor and everything, and we contract that out. Even with like graphics and that kind of thing, we have laptops to run that and everything. But it really ranges. 99, and this is not an actual number by any means, but 99% of our like services, we need to borrow this, we need to rent this, we need to rent this. So a lot of it's not having a staff so much anymore. Although June's always crazy.
Yeah.
Not just for me, but like for every musician rental house. When we just did a wedding that was pretty large scale, and it only took one contractor. I always give my contractors the option, like, do you want the whole payday, or do you want to have someone else with you and they split the pay or whatever? And he chose to take the whole payday, and you know, that was a big gig, and it worked out great and everything. But you know, sometimes they get real big, as much as like, can I just have a speaker? Yeah. You can do that.
Well, it's interesting the way that ties into your. You're not an educator by occupation. You're just an educator of a person. You like to dig into the weeds of things, and then when folks come to you with questions, you seem excited to digest and feed that information in a way that feels congruent. And I've called you with a lot of dumb questions, and you've always been there for that kind of thing.
They're not dumb questions. There are dumb questions, but you haven't asked me dumb questions. And I don't want to cause conflict or anything, but I would say now I'm definitely an educator by occupation.
Yeah, but not solely is what I'm saying. Like, even when you put someone in front of a system and you say, do you want to take the whole payday? Do you want to split this up? You're educating by saying, this is how this day is going to run, and this is how I expect you to handle this. And one of the glass ceilings, especially for folks that I think the trajectory that you took as a musician to now being behind the board and that being the instrument you play and that's how you work with it, it's a path that not a lot of people look at as you following the vocation fully.
Yeah, and there's I don't want to go, well, I do want to go if you have time. But
when are you going to make some enemies on this show, Jake? Okay.
But I'm happy to go into this, but there's a lot of stuff that I am careful to make decisions on. In short, I just want to say this. There's this online learning platform called Coursera. It's a bunch of free college courses. They have one that's called The Science of Wellbeing. So the detour here is like, check that out if you haven't checked it out.
Course Zero, The Science of Wellbeing.
Coursera, The Science of Wellbeing. Free college course, I believe from Harvard. It talks about just being happy and like the science of being well-being. You know what I mean? Like just being content and happy with yourself and making decisions and not having identity crisis or anything like that.
Can you spell that for me? Because I'm still not grasping.
Coursera.
Okay.
Now, keep in mind, when I was in the 8th grade, I took a competency test in English for writing. I can read very well, but for writing, it was like a 2nd grade level. So I am horrible with writing. Horrible, which is hilarious because I have to write papers all the time now. Yeah. But anyways, I mentioned that because like the whole vocational thing that you mentioned, right? Like, man, when I was in middle school, high school, early college, I wanted to be a guitar player. That's all I wanted to do. That's it. That was just like, I just want to play gigs. And I dove deep. I took lessons with some pretty heavy people. I did all these crazy transcriptions. I was like really into it, you know? And then I was having this trouble where, like, you know, I remember a very specific day where I didn't want to practice because it was work. And I was like, well, you know, that's kind of defeating the purpose of this whole, like, do it for fun thing. Because now it sounds like it's not being fun anymore. And there's people who can do that. You know what I mean? Like, there's people who get, like, for me with video games, it's like that. I'll play Halo for 20 hours and I'll still have fun, right? That's not my guitar, though. So I realized that and was like, okay, this might not be the thing for me. And then I talked to a lot of people. I'm very methodical in research and that kind of thing. And this is actually something I didn't know if we were going to talk about or not, so I did write down a couple of notes. But, like, one of the things I remember was when you have these top-level musicians, you get the gig. The full-time playing for a symphony, full-time playing for whatever. This is from the International Conference of Symphony and Opera Musicians. 27% of musicians use beta blockers, which is essentially, you know what a beta blocker is. And it's because of, you know, the anxiety, and, you know, it's a high-pressure field, and it's something that you're supposed to love. Why is it high pressure then? You know, so it's like this internal conflict. People do it and people love it, and I think people should. I'm not one of those, right? I identify as like, okay, it was something that made me nervous, it made me stressed out. So in order for me to go towards happiness, I was like, okay, what do I like? And then, have you heard the phrase passion as a byproduct of mastery? Have you heard that before?
No.
So, like, it's similar to happiness is a byproduct of life, meaning, like, you don't aim to be happy. You do something that makes you happy, right? Like, what makes you happy? Well, I love playing music and I love, you know, transmitting emotions into people. Okay, you are happy because of that. You're not happy because you're pursuing happiness, right? So passion as a byproduct is another thing where I became very passionate about, at first, music technology, and then AV technology as a whole, video, audio, lighting, that stuff. And I got very passionate about it because I would say, didn't have to do a lot of work to get good at it. It came naturally to me. And then once I took a lot of work into it, then I got way more passionate about it, right? So that's kind of how I got away from that vocational mindset of guitar. That's not to say that people shouldn't do that and pursue it. If you are able to do that and it doesn't give you the nerves, doesn't give you anxiety, doesn't compromise your happiness, do it. If it is, there's no shame in changing course. There's no shame in feeling bad about something. There's no shame in any of that. Do what you got to do for you, right? So that's a long spiel, but that's how I kind of got away from the performing and got more into the technology stuff.
Yeah. And so the well-being course, when did you find that?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the mindset that I got from that course was before I took the course. The course was an affirmation more than anything. So, because I was all nervous about this, you know what I mean? Like, if you're a diehard musician, the whole thing you're supposed to do is be a diehard musician. That's your identity sometimes. And I'm like, well, people are identified by themselves, not necessarily what their goals are or whatever, which, like, that's part of it, but you don't have to tie all of your, you don't have to put all your hats on that stand or whatever. So I took the course. This was, I want to say, I took it like shortly after it was released, which is pretty recently, like 2020, 2019, something like that. But the mindset that the course affirmed for me, I adopted that about my junior year of college. I remember that. I don't remember what year that is. I want to say I started college in 2013, so that would have been 2016 or so. So about 3 years before that course came out. But that course, I took that in right when it came out, which I really wish I remembered when, but somewhere between the span of 2019 and 2021. I know I think the pandemic was a thing, so probably 2020 or 2021. Like it was a thing when I took the course. Is what
Okay,
I mean.
no.
I'm not saying that there's no pandemic or anything like, but it was a thing when I took the course.
That's not like the controversial stance. That's like the, well, I was busy, so I didn't really notice that I was wiping off my. I was wiping my groceries before this happened. You realize that? I've never trusted Cheetos. Okay, I take them out of the bag, I rebake them, I break them down.
It's a process. It takes a long time to eat Cheetos.
And that's why I went to Harvard.
Yeah.
Online, but I went.
But yeah.
So this mindset that you felt affirmed by in the course, like, was this just some general life advice that people were giving you? Was this just the way that you were starting to look at the world by a junior in college?
I was very skeptical of the world. I don't mean that in some big philosophical thing. Everyone's skeptical of things. I was just skeptical of like how do people actually feel. And this is a little bit cynical, so I hope I'm not upsetting anyone when I say this, but like some people
not
are
enough
like,
listeners to be offended. Don't worry about it. We love you. Thank you for being here.
but I was like, you know, people say they love this. How much do they actually love it? People say they love this thing about their life. How much do they actually like that, right? And I was a little bit cynical because, like, you know, I tell, you know, you've gotten some weird gifts or something, and like, let's say, like, not specifically for your wedding or anything, but like, let's say like when you're a kid, and then you get a gift, and it's from your grandma. It's completely off the cusp. It doesn't make sense for what you like, etc. Well, you tell your grandma though, you love it, right? And so I feel like people do that externally because we have this whole social pressure of like, I need to be happy so that I look good for other people and all this stuff. I hate that. So essentially I got skeptical, and then, you know, I was looking at friends, family, etc., people who were doing these, people you can kind of get a hint, and this is some judging, so I don't know how accurate it is, but like, I'm like, I bet that's not really that enjoyable. Or I bet that's really stressful. Or I see this person's really stressed a lot. I wonder if it has to do with this. And it's a little bit judgmental. It's actually very much judgmental. But I'm trying to learn from it for my own sake. And I see people doing these high-pressure professions. And that's not just music. You know, that's like medical, nursing, you know, whatever the case. Teaching at whatever level. All those things can be high pressure if it doesn't fit what you're passionate about or what you feel like you're inherently good at. Or I don't want to say good at, because you can be amazing at something if you put enough hours, but like something that doesn't come necessarily the easiest to you. And that's kind of why I started thinking about it. And I was like, you know, they're really stressed out because of this. So then I'm thinking like, how can I avoid that with me? Because I don't want to be 20 years into a career of something I'm like, this sucks. You know what I mean? And the whole next level of like thinking like, I want to have kids and then be like, this sucks, come home to that. You know what I mean? I don't want to deal with that either. So I really wanted to make sure that everyone around me and myself were benefiting from what I was doing. Because you can do something that makes you incredibly stressed, that makes you irritable to your partner, your family, your kids, whatever the case, your friends. So I think it's good to make sure that you are happy so that you can be positive for other people as well. And that's not like being a martyr or anything. That's actually being selfish, like making sure that you feel good about what's going on. So I know that was a long answer, but I hope that.
No, I think it's a good answer, and I think in this line of work that is entertainment on many levels, whether it's educational entertainment or the drunken wedding of your dreams, it's like these things they're supposed to feel great, but there's good and bad days, and I'm a firm believer in order to give 100, I need to make sure I myself am at 100.
Yeah.
And you know, one of the great things about partnership and the hardest thing about partnership is you hope that you're both at 100.
Yeah.
But realistically, one of you's at 60, the other one's at 40. One of you is at 80, the other one's at 20. And you need to be there for each other in recharging your personal batteries. Like, I can't give you 10 and expect myself to be okay at 70. I need to learn my own traits. And most folks don't get to that level of understanding with themselves until it's kind of too late. Until you're 3 kids and a bad career and no investments and a horrible diet. It's just like you let these things grow up as complacent just enough. And then one day you find out that you want to pull down the house of cards.
Yeah. The other tricky, I want to disagree with you on one thing. It's never too late to turn life around. Never, never, never. I mean, I've had family that we never saw, and then they're back. You know, I mean, it's never too late. But you can dig yourself deeper and deeper holes. So it's good to kind of understand this stuff early on, right? Like you mentioned retirement, and you and I are buddies. You know, I'm obsessed with personal finance. Part of the reason I'm obsessed with it, and plenty of opinions on how things should be and everything, just how the game is played right now. If you want to be comfortable in later life, you do have to save money. And I'm going to leave it at that. But like when you want to, you know, that's not just you being comfortable, that's your kids being comfortable. That's your spouse being comfortable. That's your family being comfortable. Because like one thing I see that's, you know, again, 100% me, and I don't want to say like you should focus on you and not think about other people, but you're able to facilitate other people a little bit better if you have some things going for you. And that's a very, I would say, selfish and probably very privileged mindset. But like,
I think that's honest altruism.
Yeah.
It's like if you can't take care of yourself, how do you expect to be there for other people?
Exactly. And so you have like people who are maybe not great with finances, and you have this whole debate, like not debate, but I've talked to people and they'll say like, well, I'm spending money on my kid's college. I'll be like, okay, are you comfortable for retirement? It's like, okay, and they say no. I'm like, all right, like you think you're helping out your kid, but what's going to happen when you go to retire? They think Little Sally's going to let you, you know, be poor and let you be no, they're going to take out of their finances to cover you. They'd actually be better off with you not doing that, because they're not going to let you fail, right? So everything, as much as it might be an external loving gesture, which it is, there's nothing wrong with it. It just might not be the most efficient external loving gesture.
Yeah. Well, and short-sighted moves to help people are difficult because you should make calculated risks like that. You know, our beautiful friend Nick Hack is my number 2 in this band. We spend all this time together talking about what's the best and the worst case scenario and how do we measure this out. And for a number of years, I was trying to put the band up as many times a week, a month, a year as possible, because I want to provide for these guys in my life. And what I found is I was taking a smaller and smaller cut of what I was generating to prop up this thing that I thought was great. And he pulled me aside one day. He says, is this sustainable?
Yeah.
Are you going to run out of money trying to tour and pay us that we're not going to be able to do this 5 years from now?
100%.
And the answer was absolutely yes. I was running myself dry at that point. So I flipped my business model and I said, here are the rates by which we operate.
Yeah.
And whether that's, you know, clubs and corporate get different rates, obviously.
Yeah.
But the first needs to be met are my own. Because it's like being on the airplane going down. You put your own oxygen mask on, and then you take care of the person next to you. And if it looks like they're struggling, you should laugh for a second. Then you should, no, I'm kidding.
Jesus.
No, come on, man. I mean, because when they're struggling to put on the mask, you might be able to get their crackers. And if we're going to make it out of this, you didn't realize your snacks were stolen. You're just glad to be alive. And I walk out a champion of my circumstance.
Oh, man.
This is why I fly Delta, because they have better snacks.
They have better snacks.
If I'm going to be a thief, I'm not going to go for some low-grade shit.
I understand.
Exactly. Exactamente. Since we're going to cross into the world of personal finance, Jake Richter, tell us what the best 3 credit cards to have in terms of reciprocated benefits would be.
I don't want to get tied to anything. I'm not going to say specific cards, but I'll say like get something. Well, first thing I'll say is don't get a credit card if you can't do a credit card.
I don't like that advice, Ricky. Come on, let's try again.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying like if you have a hard, like you run them up. No, I'm saying if you run them up, you get a lot of interest. That's not only going to hurt you; that's going to hurt those around you too. Like
heavy.
Avoid that. If you are a credit card person, as in you can have a credit card and be disciplined with it. It's not bad that you're not able to be disciplined with it. Okay, there's no shame in that. There's just certain things you can't do. You put me in a room full of Reese cups, I'm going to eat them all, right? Like, everyone has their thing that they can't control. And
I love that you've expressed that many a times, too. It's like, I'm always trying to find out, like, what's Jake's real vice? And, like, you've told me enough times, I just never remember it's Reese cups. LinkedIn and Reese cups, if you want to see this.
Reese cups. But there's just certain things, and if you're one of those people who can't control with the credit cards, don't get one. If you are able to control and you have a credit card and all that, I like having one that's autopilot. Like there's 2 that I like. There's some that it's just 2% back on everything. There's multiple ones of those out there. Just do that. It's easy. And there's ones that are. There's one again. I don't want to name specifics because I don't want to be like this guy's pro this thing or whatever. It's like I'm not really pro anything. I'm just doing whatever works for me. But there's a card. There's cards that basically they look whatever your top percentage category is. Like let's say you eat out a lot, or you go to grocery. You have a high grocery bill, or you travel a lot. You know, it'll analyze your statement, take the top percentage, or the top spend category, and it'll say, okay, you get 5% back on that. And so I like things that are autopilot because, like, as much as I make spreadsheets and I do all this crazy stuff, and I have a dumb amount of credit cards and all this stuff, I don't think everyone should do that.
Yeah.
If you have the time, cool, and you enjoy it, cool. If you don't have the time, you don't enjoy it, autopilot, dude. Don't make it hard.
Was it ever something you thought you'd enjoy? Were you a kid with a piggy bank that the coins were already rolled and you knew what was exactly in there, or did you flip the light switch on one day?
I was really bad with money when I was a kid. And that was fine because, to be perfectly blunt, I had like really well off parents. But like I get something, I spend it. I get something, I spend it. I get something, I spend it. And what's ironic is like my family's actually really good, or my parents are actually really good with finances, but we just never had to talk, right?
Yeah.
So then at some point, I can't remember what it was, man. Like, I remember who it was, and it's this goofy guy. He's a magician. He does card tricks for his YouTube videos, and he talks about stocks. Okay.
While he does card tricks?
Yeah. He's like a magician guy.
Dude, this is deep.
I can't remember his name, and I feel so guilty for not knowing his name. He's a big, like, Graham Stephan level influencer.
Yeah.
So I watched a lot of his stuff, and then, I don't want to slam him or anything, but, like, he talked a lot about individual stocks, which is not something I would advise anyone to do. But, like, I went from him to someone else, to someone else, to someone else, like listening things. And then I talked to like my dad about it, and my dad's actually like really knowledgeable about it. He's never had to talk. And so then we chat about it, and then my brother-in-law is also like into this stuff too. So we all chat about it. There was a little point in time where I was talking about it with, Nick and John and you, I believe, were in that group chat too. And we were like,
there's still a Facebook group for this. You know?
I think there is, and I haven't done anything with it. But like, there's all these different things, and eventually I landed on some seldom advice that I stuck on. But no, it literally is nothing significant. It was literally like, I found this video, I thought it was very interesting. It was from this guy who did magic tricks, so it's like, okay, cool, whatever. And then he talked about, I think he was talking about like some stock at the time, like GE or P&G or something like that, and like, I think it's going to go up, I think it's going to go down. And I'm like, well, how do you think about that? And then eventually I just kind of figure out, like, not I figured out, but I watched stuff that helped me figure out, like, okay, maybe stay away from the single stock game, just stick with the safe stuff, the ETFs and all that, and keep everything in a tax-free account, or not tax-free, but a retirement account, not everything. Again, I don't want to give general advice.
No, I get you. I think it's important to hear from happy people about how you measure this stuff, and you don't let it be the obsession of your life.
Yeah.
That could be one of your obsessions. It could be a passionate hobby for you. Yeah. And if you look at it as a good thing rather than a chore, and that's a calibration point. Like you talked about people that say they're happy that don't seem happy. Like I'm a firm believer that the optimism is a choice of your day, but it's kind of also a byproduct, like you said.
Yep.
And one thing that's been really tough for me in the last couple months of being sober and kind of reassessing my view on things is realizing that gratitude is a very active part of my day. It needs to be active because it's not going to happen passively. So I'm trying to be better about starting there in the day. And then, like you kind of said, like there's the byproduct of being more optimistic because I counted the things that mean something to me.
Yeah.
And I started my day feeling like I was okay. I was already good.
Yeah.
Versus if you start in the spiral, the odds of you getting out of the toilet bowl that's flushing is very low.
It's easier to go uphill when you're already going uphill, right? It's hard to go uphill after you've gone downhill for a bit. So I think making that transition is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a routine or anything. There's certain things I think to myself, like, and there's like stupid cheesy stuff I do too. Like I have a note card in our house. It looks just like this. I walk around with these things all the time, and I have a note card in our house, and all it just says real big letters on it, breathe, because I get stressed out of how much is on my plate sometimes. So I just have a note card. I see it every once in a while, and it says breathe. Sometimes in my head when I'm having like a stressful time or something like that. Right now, the biggest stressor is like, not the biggest stressor, but like one of the stressors is the animals at our house. We have a new one, relatively new one, and trying to get that new one to kind of fit in with everything, because it has, there's a lot of things with animals. Like it could go to the bathroom wherever, and that's.
I like that you're not saying what the animal is, as if it's gonna watch the show and be like, I knew he was pissed.
I don't want to, but. I'm not really big on singling things out, but we have this.
You're still okay. I'll look on your LinkedIn for the truth. How about?
Yes, yeah. But the whenever I have something like that that's a bit of a stressor, I do wake up and like, okay, this is stressful, but then I always try to think, and this is super cheesy. I don't think everyone should do this or whatever, but this works for me. And like, I do wake up. Or if I'm having a stressful time, I do say in my own head, I don't say it out loud, I choose XYZ. That could be like, I choose this animal because I love this animal. I choose this because I love this. I got that from this book I read, and I've been reading all these stupid self-help books, like all the stereotypical ones. And one of them is the 5 love languages. You ever heard of that? They have it for like different, like the 5 love languages of parents, the 5 love languages of couples, of men, of women. It's like that whole thing. And so I read one of those, and they all come out in these different love languages. And I actually got that advice from that book. It's just like, it's specifically talk about spouses in that book, and like Madison and I aren't having a hard time or anything. I just read these stupid self-help books for fun.
But you seem like a proactive person,
yeah.
And also you two are the perfect nerdy pairing of musicians.
We are. It's fun.
It's incredible to look at. It's like,
yeah. So I read this book, and like one of the things in there is like, it says like, hey, like one of the things you can do is just wake up and say, I chose this person, right? And that's actually like a very sappy thing. Now I don't do that with Madison, because Madison and I like pretty easy going, but with the animals, I definitely need a little bit more patience. So I say like,
to remind yourself that this was an optional thing,
yes,
and you already said yes.
I love this thing. Yes. Yeah. Well, it's not so much that I'm roped in or anything, but like I am like choosing, like, the good certainly outweighs the bad. Like, okay, you peed on the rug, whatever. Like, I still enjoy you. I still, all this stuff. So. Yeah, that the whole I choose you mindset is a good gratitude exercise, but I don't have like any like routine. I have that little breathe card. I have the mindset saying I choose you to whatever thing.
Are you an audiobooks person, or you actually sit down with the book and?
You're gonna laugh at me because we're on a podcast. I am a firm believer that audiobooks do not work. Like, not that they don't work. They work for some people, but there's this thing I teach at the college. And at Lores College, it's the one in California, fully remote teaching. Okay, a lot of students will log into the class, put on their phone, and then do something else. They'll just listen to me talk. I'm like, okay, like, dude, I listen to finance podcasts, and I know the high level takeaway. Like, oh, shop around. Like, I was listening to one on the way here. Shop around for mortgage interest, stuff like that. It was like saying, look at credit unions. I can remember high stuff like that, right? The high level of takeaways. The details, don't remember them, because that's not active listening. When you're listening to a podcast and you're doing something else, that's not active listening. You're not gonna be like a sponge. Some people are, but I find a significant people are not. So, audiobooks, same kind of thing. So what I do, and I shouldn't say that audiobooks don't work, because I do listen to audiobooks. But you know what I do?
I think it's a funny, bold statement. I think you should. I think you should put it on your LinkedIn, and you should put people down for it. I mean, like.
But what I do is if I'm going to listen to something that I want to really take a lot of things away from, like the podcast I listened to on the way up here to like see you and everything, that was a finance podcast. It's this guy, he's a TV personality. I am not going to be upset if I don't sponge all that, right? It's entertainment and I take away some high level stuff. Cool. But if it's something that like you really want to learn from, like let's say a textbook or a self-help book or something you're trying to improve, I sit down, I put headphones on, I put on a Bluetooth speaker, whatever the case, and I listen and then I write down notes like I'm in class. That's called active listening. And
so you mix the audiobook with the...
No, I don't. Oh, wait, go ahead.
So you put on the audiobook and you read along with it and you annotate as you go?
Well, if I have the book, I would like to do that. I don't do that. I have like a note card, like, something like this. Or I have a notebook. And I just take notes. You know what I mean? Like they say something that's really profound and it sticks with me, I write that down. And then if they say some details about it, it's like I'm in class again.
Yeah.
And so that's active listening, and that's what I strongly recommend. So like I shouldn't have come out like swinging like audiobooks and podcasts don't work. They work. I just don't think they don't work how people think they do.
I'm going to make clips of this. I'm going to make you look like a bad person for that.
Yeah.
The reason you like audiobooks is because you can barely read.
yeah, like we just hey, remember, I can read. I have horrible writing. I can't write very well.
When I was a kid, my sister told me like one of her love languages is if someone gave her a book that they had annotated as they read.
Oh, that's
so
cute.
It's like there's a conversation that happens in the little side corners, and then I realized my handwriting is so poor that I can't do this. So I tried, and I just fucked up a bunch of good books.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in the active versus passive reading, because I also feel like I know that better in my gigging life than I know it in my listening life. Like I can be up there running even some of my own tunes, which they are my precious, but at the same time, like, oh no, I'm on airplane mode, dog. Like that thing's just going, and I'm not letting a signal in because I'm watching the Celtics play a basketball game.
Yeah.
Or when I play certain gigs at certain establishments, that you can probably guess, I'm watching people get approached by an escort. You know?
Yeah.
Or I'm watching a date go bad.
Yes.
And it's weird the way that sometimes your passive self does things that your active self is really impressed by.
Yeah. No, I get that.
And I think part of enjoying the fruits of your labor, trying to master something, which 10,000 hours or whatever many, it's like you're never there.
No,
but to the therapeutic side of letting that part of you roll is really exciting at times. It
is. It's cool when you're so familiar with a process that you can do it passively. That being said, it can be tricky. Like for me, I'll go into, I've been having this thing lately where if I'm mixing a record and I'm doing the whole thing, like, okay, listening, this, that, doing this, organize this, cut that out, that needs to be EQ'd differently, I need to make room for vocal. I'm just doing this like autopilot. And I'm checking reference tracks and everything. There's something cool about that. But then I have to like check myself and be like, okay, hang on, take a break. This is a creative thing. Let's get back into active mode, right? And I've actually gotten a pretty good little like happy system for me. Like I do the whole passive autopilot thing probably for the first 1 to 2 hours of a mix or something like that. And I'm like, okay, everything's balanced. Everything's nice and comfy, right? Like I can hear everything without any kind of issues. This is speaking well. This is automated volume well. And then after that, I get to do the like sprinkling, right?
Yeah.
And that's when I'm really actively listening. That being said, that's burned me a couple times. So then I had to like almost redo the last half hour of a mix or something where I listen to the reference. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm really good with like translating references and like making sure I don't copy them, making sure that whatever information I'm taking from the reference is like enhancing the song, not taking it. Well, if I'm on autopilot, sometimes I'll do that. And then I check myself. I'm like, oh, you know what? Like this tune is like a badass guitar song. You know what I mean? And the reference is not so much. It's like chordy, strummy kind of things. So then I'm like, well, I referenced it, and then now I have this guitar. It's a little bit wimpy in this song where it's supposed to be like, something really, really intense. I'm like, shit. So then I go back and everything. So, and that doesn't happen often or anything, but it's something I notice that when you get comfortable with doing something, you do have that kind of passive mentality, and I really try to get out of that. I like active as much as possible, which is like it's really the opposite of a lot of people now, which is I think this works great for most people. The juggling, like I'm gonna listen to a podcast while I work out and I meal plan. It's like, you know what I mean? I'm like, Jesus, no thank you. Like I'm gonna sit down, I'm gonna listen to the podcast and take notes. I'm going to work out, and then I'm going to sit down with a paper and write out my meal plan.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's why Planet Fitness has a liability waiver. God damn it! You can't use your shaker bottle while you're on here. You can't make your meal. You know.
So I'm a little bit weird about the passive thing. I don't think it's bad. Like, dude, I talked to I don't want to say who because I don't want to get in trouble, but like I talked to this really serious grade A engineer, works on high level records. And he does everything passively because he's got the formula, not the formula, but like it's not like there's a secret formula, but he's got his flow. It works every time, and it makes hit records.
Yeah.
And it's all done kind of passively. He's like, I'm on autopilot, dude. I just go through and do it. I'm like, how the hell? Like for me, I can't get my mindset in that.
Well, I think people have different definitions of flow state, and
that's true.
And yours might be a very active, intentional thing.
Yes.
Versus other folks might do best when they're in that almost careless kind of state,
like floating. I kind of think of it as.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, my wife Emily just recently got into photography, and watching your partner rediscover or discover for the first time something they are so passionate about that you almost lose them from their body next to you. Like the other day we were driving down to Savannah for her friend's wedding. I say our friends, but I don't get the claim for that. So I get back from my gig, and I'm about to drive 5 hours that night to Knoxville, or 4 hours to Knoxville, then do the rest of the drive, and she was going to fly down.
Wow.
And she had a week, and she was like, I don't really want to not be hanging out for a little bit. Like, I'd rather be with you. I was like, then get in the car. We'll worry about getting rid of that flight another time. So she just gets in the car, and then for 10 hours of a car ride, I just saw her edit photos.
Yeah, like on a laptop?
Exactly, and just on YouTube, learning how to do different masking things and whatnot. And normally, once we hit 4 hours, she loses sanity in the car. Just can't do it. Yeah. And I think that shit's funny. I mean, I'm poking at pride waiting for her to lose it. But her tolerance level for this, she was just so deep in the weeds.
Yeah.
And I think she's more on that side similar to you, where it's like, I am most flow state when I am so actively engaged in this thing.
Yes.
Versus one thing that I've struggled with in the sober side of things is like songwriting for me was a flow state. Mm-hmm. It was a catch and release kind of mindset. Yes. And now I have the interjections of my active thinking all over this.
Yeah.
And I am backspacing everything to hell, and I'm throwing away good shit. Mm-hmm. So I'm relearning that process, and maybe it's more active in the way that you're saying.
Yeah. Well, it kind of depends. Like, there's also something I call fast active in my head. This isn't like I'm sure there's some technical term for this that some person's already come up with. But fast active is like, you can still give 100% and be active, but you might just be trying to pump out as much stuff and then cream the crop. You know what I mean? Like, so one thing I've done before, and it's actually worked out pretty well. It's not very time efficient. But one thing I've done before is I'll do like, usually when I mix, I'll have one version. Every once in a while, there's some subjective stuff. I'll be like, here's two versions, Matt. What do you think of this and this? Do you want me to go down this rabbit hole or this rabbit hole? But there's been times where actually I have like a lot of interpretation of a song, and I'll do like 8 versions of the mix, and they'll be lower quality mixes because I'll be doing them quickly. But I'll do 8 versions of a mix and be like, hey, dude, like, here's some mindsets I have. And I usually do a Zoom meeting because I don't want to email them 8 files and they'd be like, what the hell? You know what I mean? I usually just pull up a Zoom meeting and be like, here's this one. This is why I went this direction. And then usually I can tell by their reactions pretty quickly, like, oh, go towards that one. We don't have to look at the other ones. You know what I mean? But there's something to be said about that, too. I kind of stole that idea from, I was in college. We had this really amazing girl come and talk to us about songwriting. I want to say it was Jane Decker. You've had Jane Decker on this show before, haven't you?
No.
No. She had an EP. I'm going to get all these details wrong, but she had an EP come out, and I want to say it was like the 76 EP, some number EP, and it's like 5 songs or something. And they called it that number because that's how many songs they wrote. And they like took the cream of the crop, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, like, can I do that for mixing? The answer is yes. It just takes a shit ton of time. So and there's nothing wrong with doing it that way, I would say. And even then, I don't like finish the mixes. It's not really efficient. But like, I think there's something to be said about fast active too. Like, you don't have to necessarily. I don't know. You can be a state of flow, get a bunch of things done, and then go back and be like, okay, what do we have here? Like, and go shopping through the stuff that you made.
Yeah.
Be like, I want this one. Sorry, everyone else. you know?
That kind of brings us to a funny point of like our work together. Like you did the big crash in the similar format where you sent me like 3 different mixes of it. And then I never knew this, but I found out later on that I chose one of your least favorite mixes of it.
Oh, you heard that from probably from John or something.
Yeah, exactly. And what's hilarious but brilliant about that is like that's how you work. You know, that's how you kind of envision giving the best product to the folks that are contracting you in.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, for me, I'm calling Jake Richter because I want your thumbprint to the max. I want exactly what you would think is best. So I think it shows your humbleness that you approach the work, but it's also like, I'd rather not have an option and have you in totality.
Yeah, it kind of depends too, because I'm happy to be left to my own accord and do all that stuff. However, what if I drive the ship backwards, or what if I go left instead of right, and like the artist wants to go that way? So I like to do that kind of like check-in thing, because like, yes, I'm happy to give away my thumbprint. I'm happy to do that all day, but at the end of the day, I'm serving the music and the song. And the person who has a good idea of that is either the producer or the writer. Sometimes, depending on the situation, contractually, it's the artist who recorded it. But I usually like to kind of check myself that way, too.
Yeah.
So, and being humble is a big part of that, too. And that's something that, like, whole other conversation. I don't want to
You probably do a little too much of it, you know?
Well, you think
Yeah.
I've had some
but I think that's one of the greatest things about you is that you are so active about that, and it's part of your well-being is checking that thing all the time.
But, and there's the opposite problem with a lot of the audio
Say their
industry.
names.
I'm not going to do that.
Come on, this is going on my LinkedIn.
on the bright side, like I will say this, in Cincinnati we have a lot of like really good guys that are just, and I shouldn't say guys. I'm trying to not. I say guys when I talk about my students. I say guys about everything.
That should be a gender neutral. That's why I've stuck to y'all and players.
Y'all, yeah.
Players is my favorite gender neutral.
Yeah, I never had anyone call me out on it because I've been teaching for a few years now, and I'm like, hey guys, hi guys. I do all that stuff, and then I at one point it was just last semester. I had this young woman in my class, and she said, we're not all guys. I'm like, holy shit, like that's a reality check. So I try to be better about it now.
When I totally get hearing that and reciprocating the respect and the attentiveness to it, but also when I think back to high school in Spanish class, where it's like, no, you just defer for simplicity's sake of how that's how the language. It's like, okay, we're living in a little bit of a different world every year as we learn more about each other, and that's awesome. But you can't blame yourself for making a mistake that you didn't become aware of until someone pointed it out.
Well, yeah, I get that too. There's two faults to that. Like, yes, I'm happy that I know about that flaw now. At the same time, like, how much have I analyzed, like, how I speak and that kind of thing? Because I could have analyzed that and figured that out myself too. But you can say about anything, right?
Yeah,
hindsight's 20/20 all the time.
I would go with players. I think it's definitely
players.
The first time I called my dad a player, he goes, "What did you just say?" I was like, "It's a compliment."
That doesn't fit my vibe very well, Matt.
Jake, I'm telling you. I mean, you're Reese Cup loving, LinkedIn using.
What's the scientific word for
players?
No, for humans, Homo sapiens, something like that. I'll just start calling people that. Hello, Homo sapiens.
Just go with sapiens.
Sapiens. Hello, sapiens. Oh, you're right. I didn't think. So, but I don't know. It can be. It's good to receive feedback and be humble, and you just gotta be, I don't know. I'm definitely, I've had trouble before where people are like, just do whatever you think is best. I'm like, okay, as long as you tell me that, like, I'll do that. But even then, I'm still afraid of like, am I going to drive the car the wrong highway? Am I going to am I going to do something different that you don't want to do?
Yeah.
And one thing I really hate doing is like, I've had this happen before, and I would say that it's left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. I've had artists before, and they say, do exactly whatever you want, okay? And then I send them, the draft or whatever. Sometimes I send them 3. That's part of the reason I do 3, did 3 for you. But I'll send them a draft, and they're like, complete different direction. I don't want this at all. It's like, okay, like, I wanted to know where to drive the car first.
Yeah, and now we kind of wasted some time.
Yeah, and I don't, but, and so now I try to be really good about communicating. I'm not always, like, the best, but, like, I try to be pretty good about, like, okay, I appreciate you said you want everything of me into this. I'm still going to send you some versions because I want you to give me a little bit of directions, right? Because the last thing I want to do is be done and be like, here you go, dude, you did the thing. And here's the song, release it. Well, I'm not very happy with it. And then how do I tell Jake I'm not very happy with it? Yeah. And sometimes that can be hard too. Some people are really good about giving feedback. Some people are really nervous to get feedback. You know what I mean? So I try to be very accessible and say, like, tell me, like, what you hate. And here's 3 rabbit holes. Which one do you want us to go down? Yeah. So it can be a little daunting. And then you have, like, I have some clients that are the opposite. They're like, don't bug me. Just give me the thing. Like, okay, like, I can do that too.
Yeah. But more than ever, I'm starting to, in my own production life, starting to work with other artists and try to assist in that. Because, what I've told other people, I've told you about, is I went through a musical divorce, per se, where I found out that I wasn't expressing myself fully through the music because of the constraints of time and access to equipment and all these things. And as the Spotify CEO has mentioned,
it's cheap, right?
Not only is it cheap, but you should do more of it for less. But that being said, the barrier to entry is lower. The glass ceiling is a little thicker and a little harder to break through. Yeah. But the X variable, the barrier to entry is lower. We have more space to work with this. Yes. So embracing that freedom comes at the cost of all great art has constraints. Yes. When you lose those constraints, you can go off into
the rails.
Neverland, and it gets very daunting at that point too. And I describe it to people as like, you're making a subjective house of cards that at any point you could flick that thing. And yeah. And so when someone sends you A, B, and C, and you pick one, now we have,
a potential flick, is that what you're saying?
Not only a potential flick, but the other direction too, where it's like, oh, now we've solidified one layer of this. And avoiding that is important. Yeah. Because if we get to the end and we go for the flick, now everyone's morale to continue in what's supposed to be this happiness-bearing, wealth-bearing project. Yeah. It's just like, oh my God.
Yeah. You've heard the Steely Dan story before. They got to the point where they were about to master it, and they're like, this needs background vocals. Then they had to go.
and those maniacs would make that special.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
go ahead.
I wasn't going to say much. I'm just going to say that can be discouraging. Now, for them, they were very happy with what they were doing. They had all the talent in the world on that record and all that stuff. But for a lot of people, when this is their slog, this is their day, this is their work, and their passion, they love it, that can be a little bit discouraging. Like, oh, by the way, this thing we were going to do, now it's pushed back 2 months before you get any, we'll say, reward from it or any release from it or anything like that. It's like, oh. Yeah.
When there's a weird thing now too, where and I'm dealing with this. I just got a finished song at hand. Now the creative process begins for how that rolls out, and that is as much of a process as ground up from song. Yeah. So you have to reserve some of your capacity for that, knowing that they're 2 separate ventures, but the success of one is entirely based on that of the other.
I totally get that. I've had this whole crazy mindset myself of like trying to record some of my own music, which I've done a little bit of, but I've never released anything. I am my own worst enemy with that. And I did this whole EP that I absolutely was very happy with, and I'm like, I should figure out a way to release this. And then what I did? I went and taught some courses. I went and took on a whole bunch of freelance projects, and just never really gave myself a shot with that. And then I had this whole idea where I was going to write and record a song to be release ready every 2 weeks, which was a very fun process. I did that for like 3 months. Didn't release anything. You know what I mean? Like, I think you're completely right with reserving some of that and giving that some forethought. Because, like, and I also had this barrier, I'll say, like a self-made barrier, not anyone else's fault, but like I had a self-made barrier of like, I don't want to release it and then like release it wrong. You know what I mean? Like that got to me like so much. I'm like, I'm just not going to release it. It's like, well, that's worse than releasing it wrong.
Well, especially when the supplemental industry at large has now said there's a criterion for what you can even consider viable.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tell a lot of artists that are around me that, and it may seem ridiculous, is selling CDs is the one way to recoup the value of what you put into this.
Yeah.
Because even though it's not the primary medium, doesn't mean it's not a great high profit margin item, and you're trying to buy back the willingness to do it again.
Yeah.
So put that number out there, print that many, and roll out there and make sure you sell these fucking things.
And because the return on investment of one CD sale is equivalent to what, like 10 million Spotify streams or something?
It's something ridiculous like that. I mean, Snoop Dogg has a great interview where he's like, after 1 billion streams, I made 40 grand. It's like, let's do the simple math of when you would buy that on iTunes. That's 1 billion.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so we've lost, and even then people were like, you put it on iTunes and you lose all the value of this song. Because the one song used to sell the $10 record and expose them to the supplemental entertainment that they may have not come there for. All the B-side lovers of the world. Yeah.
Have you heard this is a whole other thing that we can get into. Yeah. Have you heard the super fans theory or the super fans marketing idea? I'm looking into that a little bit with my current schooling, like when it comes to marketing. And super fans are basically like, let's say I listen to your music and I love it. Your goal then as a musician with the marketing hat on is to get me to buy like everything that you know what I mean?
Everything you sell.
Yeah. Hoodie, t-shirt, this, that. And like it's almost kind of like gamifying the shopping thing, which there's some ethical considerations there, but like, you know what I mean? If you get these 3 things, you get this thing for free or whatever the case. And one thing that I've been I haven't successfully convinced anyone this. I don't think I will, because it is like very personal, I'd say. But like for something that's a larger release, something you know is going to get a certain amount of following based on your notoriety or based on someone's notoriety or based on a placement of a song, whatever. I think that there's so much interest in music and music I mean, think about like all the college programs that have come out for like audio engineering. It's like that didn't used to be there, and there's even some ethical concerns of whether those should exist because of the job market and everything. But like that shows you there's a clear interest in it. I wonder if you could, like, let's say you have a hit song, like, dude, I'd pay like probably $200 to see like, hey, I want to buy this session from this artist and see what the Pro Tools session looks like.
Yeah.
I think that'd be kind of cool. It'd be a high profit thing if you're a smaller artist. You know, like there's an artist that I absolutely love. He's not small, but I wouldn't consider him huge, is Gregory Alan Isikoff.
I just saw him at Kemba Live.
Yeah.
Shit was awesome.
He's one of my favorite people to listen to. If there was some way for me to pay, like, hey, dude, I'm just some fan, can I pay you like $150, $200? You know, I would pay that much. I want to see what your Pro Tools sessions look like. Like how many takes are. It's vulnerable because you're going to see the takes, you're going to see the tuning, you're going to the editing, and that might be something that a lot of people are nervous about. So I get that, but I'd love to see stuff like that, and I think there's another avenue to like have some money in there with that too.
Yeah, well, I think that's. The biggest question is, once you have the product that you wanted to make, what is like the additional economics of what can you take to market that feels worthwhile? Like VIP experiences are across the board so different because people value different aspects of it. I mean, when Jacob Collier does, I don't know if you went to that show, but
I didn't go to the show, but I've only heard go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead.
A fantastic concert, but the VIP experience is not shake a hand, take a picture, move on in line. It's let's talk about music. You know, and so he did the personal introspection to say, what do I really have to offer these people?
Yeah.
And then he monetized it in a way that felt right to him. And the ethics is a huge part of that. You know, whether it's the way your T-shirts are sourced or what you sell on the table, like you need to be comfortable with that at the end of the day.
You do.
Because what you're asking is for your top fans, the 10%, the 5%, to support you to the fullest. That next 20%, how do they support you to the fullest? Like there's levels of consumption that you need to, one, make viable for yourself to keep doing the thing. The same way that Nick said, is this sustainable?
Yeah.
I need to find ways for you to support me that's sustainable.
Yeah.
And you buying the physical copy of the song makes sustainable the process by which I make the music.
Exactly.
I sell lighters on the table, not because it has anything to do with what my product is, but because you're going to buy a lighter before you hear the music because you bought a pack of smokes, okay?
Yeah, exactly. It's a convenience thing.
Exactly.
It's like when they sell whatever in the airport and you forgot it.
Yeah. You sell recession-proof products on your table because they're as fun as anything else. And also, you put a QR code in the back. The only thing you're going to pick up off the ground in a parking garage and put in your pocket is probably a lighter. And if there's other things on that table, I have questions about what you do in that parking garage. But that's why I'm selling my shit there, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Having viable products, having things that... The other thing is, make sure you have an opportunity for the super fans to grow their engagement with you. Like, let's say you only release a CD and you have no merch. The super fan, what do they have the opportunity to do? Buy a CD.
Yeah.
That's a lost opportunity, man. Like, they might love you so much that they'd love to buy a hat from you. They'd love to buy this from you. Like, have options so that people can express that. That expression comes to you as well. So there's some capital stuff with that. I like the physical merch stuff, don't get me wrong. I wish that there was some way for musicians to sell a digital product. There's a bunch of pros with that. Digital product doesn't cost very, very little to reproduce, right? And what's funny is the ironic thing is that, you know, the big thing that we all sell is MP3s, WAV files, etc. But now we can't make money off of those because they're on streaming platforms.
Yes.
But if there was something like a digital, like, I don't know, a chorus or like a whole, like, here you can pay to be a member and you can see the behind the scenes of the whole album because I set up a camera or whatever, you know, like, and that's a lot of work too because you have to trim that down and everything. But
yeah, and you have to be consistent with it. It's like
you do.
You know, one of the things about your following on Instagram is like you're going through this medium that you make money for them, and you're begging people to come to you for interest, while generating for another product. Like, I don't know if you follow Jack Conte or how you pronounce his last name, but he's the founder of Patreon.
Okay.
And he has a band called Scary Pockets that just does like reinventive covers of great pop songs. They're fucking awesome. They do a great YouTube channel. And then he has his personal band with him and his wife. But you take a medium like Patreon where it's like, so your top fans, are they willing to spend $7.99 or $15 or whatever it be a month for content that you can make that is informative? And I think that's the best arena for this guy wants to see inside your Pro Tools session. Yeah. Are you willing a year after to say on the anniversary, not only are we going to listen to this album together on a live stream, but you can ask me to look at anything, and I'm going to show you this thing, whether it's the panning or how you do this.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's just, like, I'm speaking very much from a nerd point of view, but, like, even from, like, what I call a normie musician, like a writer, player, not a musician who's doing engineering. And, like, even from that, like, it would be super sweet to be like, how'd you come up with this? Why'd you go with this progression? Why'd you come up with this lyric? What made you change that? What were the original lyrics?
Yeah.
Any part of the process where you have a following, like, this is one of the few times I will name someone, but, like, there's this guy I went to college with, Matt Beerwagon. He wrote some really cool music. And he's like over in, I think he's in LA right now. I have not kept up with him at all. But I was always, like, really, really, like, touched by his songwriting. And I would have, again, it was more of like a nervous thing. He didn't know who I was. He was a sophomore when I was a freshman, all this stuff. And essentially, I just never reached out to him. But I was always really touched by his songwriting. And I would have paid some money to be like, how'd you come up with these lyrics? They're really great lyrics. How'd you come up with, like, this part that you wanted to play? Like, that's really great parts. Like, it can be any aspect. The engineering, the writing, the performing's a little bit tough, I guess, because, like, it's like, okay, that's the part I hear in the song, I can play that. But, like, some of it's, you know, you could market a lot of that stuff. Now, you had mentioned the subscription model. You had mentioned a good point, which is like, if you do a subscription model, you have to keep up with it. And that's challenging. One thing I like to do is, or I like the idea of, is say like, one-time purchase, here's all the behind the scenes of this album. That way, they feel like they get their money's worth. They pay for it that one time. They get it, they keep it, they can download it, they can be pirated on other sites, whatever happens.
Nice.
But they can download it, they can keep it. And that relieves the pressure of you to not take a vacation or whatever. So I kind of like that one-for-one kind of thing. Like, I made this thing, you want to see this thing, pay this much, you see this thing. Like, and subscription models are different. Subscription models inherently make the person who's offering them have to work.
Yeah,
there's no question about it.
You're enslaved by your value proposition.
Exactly.
There.
Yeah, and I don't like that much. Personally.
And you can work that out in many different ways. But I think one of the interesting things about seeing that come to market is that people in a very desperate attempt to get some funding behind this sign up for it, and then they fall off, and that value proposition gets more fickle and more fickle.
Oh, it gets worse and worse.
And then also you have to worry about like the folks that got here first. Like, they are your top 10%.
Yeah.
If you burn your early adopters, they will not be here to take you to the finish line.
Yeah, and I get really nervous sometimes when, like, if I don't know, it's really easy to be on the outside looking in, right? Because I'm not a recording artist. I do all the techie stuff, but it's really, I think it's scary to see when, or not that it's scary, like I'm scared for the person, because let's say you do a Patreon thing, right? And you don't have a whole backlog of content. Like, you're making things fresh, which that's cool. That's great. Okay, you've offered a super fan service. You've offered a proposal to say, oh, I like this guy a lot. I want to see his stuff. I want to, consistently see it. I'm really excited about that. And then, let's say 4 months in, you say, okay, I can't produce this content anymore. I got too many other things, too many other baskets. I'm going to shut this down. Superfan thinks, oh, there's no way for me to expand my, my repertoire. I can't get more of a fill, right? I can't take out of this tap and put in this glass or whatever. Like, that's as I can't. So that gets, that you're breaking trust a little bit. You're not trying to. By no means are you trying to hurt anyone's feelings. But inherently, you think, I paid money for this, and now I can't get any benefit out of it. That's breaking trust with your super fans.
Totally. And again, like, there's an ethic to that. How much do you value them, and how much do they value you, and how do you bring this together? Like,
it's hard.
And social media in general is very much like that. For all of us that are trying to grow and build that, like, there was a point in time on Instagram where after a decade of work of begging my classmates from the 7th grade through college to follow me and be a part of this journey for my career, I got pulled off of Instagram. They deleted my account, and they said restart. Yeah. And I haven't made it to that point again. It's like 4,000 doesn't seem like a drop in the bucket to what you see for some of the monoliths. But for a guy like me, that was a decade of really hard work of paying photographers, videographers, and spending the time on there.
That hurts.
And so to restart that was a very painful process.
Oh, yeah.
And I kind of had to rectify, like, okay, what kind of content am I comfortable making all the time?
Consistently,
yeah. Because if you're going to get successful at something, you better like doing it, or else it's going to become the devil in your life.
Yeah.
And one of the number one reasons I do this show is because I don't get tired of asking someone new to come over here and talking to a friend and making content about this.
Yeah.
But if I was sitting down here making another video of me following trends and playing to this video and doing that, that would make me sick.
That would be a slog, I'd call it,
Yeah, exactly. A slog is a great term for it.
I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's just like you're slogging through it or whatever.
Yeah.
No, I get that completely. And, well, I shouldn't say get completely. I understand that. I ended up really reducing, like, I don't know if you recall, you and I are buddies, so you've seen this, but, like, I used to post almost every day on Facebook and Instagram with what gigs I was doing. That actually ended up, like, kind of shooting me in the foot a little bit, because, like, I was getting, so I have a plate, it's fairly full, right? Like, I'm doing the colleges, I'm freelancing. I'm doing records. I'm building the new studio in Mount Washington, all that stuff.
Congrats.
Yeah, but it's a lot of stuff, right? So when I want to say in 2020 maybe or 2021, something like that, I stopped posting a lot to Facebook. I still post every once in a while. I do post to LinkedIn. That's strictly an academia thing. Everyone in academia cares about your LinkedIn stuff. So I look at that quite a bit. But the other than that, I was getting to a point where, so it was kind of like I'll start from the beginning. I did that because it got me a lot of gigs. I would post on Facebook and Instagram. I get some Facebook message from some person I didn't know. Oh, you do sound? Oh, you do recording? You do mixing? And then I rode that train for fucking years, dude. Like getting gig after gig after gig for doing that. And I was very lucky because of that, and because I had such a fantastic network and such kind people to give me a chance on things. And so I rode that train for a while. And then I want to say it was 2020, 2021, something around it. It was around the pandemic, and I had gotten to a point where I was telling a lot of people no because I didn't have enough, availability for myself. And then what happens is like that kind of spreads rumors a little bit. I won't say rumors, but it's like, oh, you can't get a hold of him because he's so busy, or he's so not available or whatever now. And like, that's a good thing and a bad thing because everyone's like, oh, he's so official because he's so busy. It's like, well, no, I still need to work.
Yeah.
Just like reach out to me. So it was that kind of thing. So then I stopped posting, and that was probably one of the better things I did because essentially I had less people reaching out because I had too much on my plate because I would stop telling people I'm not available, okay? Or people would stop telling other people I'm not available. And then what ended up happening is now when people email me or text me, I think you referred someone to me recently, I can text them back and say, I am available. I am this many weeks out from being able to help you if it's a post-production project or something like that. Cool. Rather than them being on my door every once in a while and it's constantly being told no. What happens when you get told no 1,000 times? You stop asking. Yeah. And so it kind of worked out in my favor to stop posting. So I'm actually on the opposite end of what you had to deal with, where you're trying to get as much gathering, you get as much commitment. I'm at a point where I want the commitment, but I guess it's kind of like super fans. I want it from those few people who are going to provide for me. Yeah. Mills, James, C&D, recording clients, mixing clients, whoever the case, right?
And it's totally different to weigh the pros and cons of those relationships and how they work. Like, yeah. I can tell you, in terms of what you do and what a guy like Toby does, mm-hmm. I'm super fan of what you both work on. It's like, there's two people I go to for this mm-hmm. type of thing, and if you come to me asking who I'd recommend for this type of thing, yeah. it is only these two people. Not that I'm against other options and whatnot, but
well, I think that's a good point to bring up. You're not against other options. You just have tried and true results with these options.
And not only a level of comfort, but a level of assurance of by the time mm-hmm. I reach this stage in the process, I can lift my hands off and be thrilled with where we're going. Because I've worked through these mediums of mm-hmm. whether that's the handing back and forth of files or just saying, like, come over and let's talk about this.
Yeah.
But when it comes to comparing markets and whatnot, like, as the internet has become the main forum for how we interact, I think a Nashville or an LA or a New York becomes less of a geographic claim to fame, and it's more of a proximity to people.
Mm-hmm.
And for my help of Cincinnati having some stake in the game and having something to leverage, you need to have all the supplemental parts of that ecosystem working well. Whether that's tour managers that are tried and true and know how to do this, which we have very few of in the city, but there's still people that want to learn that, or musicians. Like, I'm very grateful that because of the bands that you and I have both worked in, that I've been able to cherry pick players and have folks on my call list and add some depth to that. Mm-hmm. Because now in this model where I make sure my needs are met and we go down the line, you might ask for the 9-piece version of Matt Waters in the recipe. Yeah. And regardless what day you ask for that and the proximity to the date, I will fill it. We will make this happen. Yeah. But there's dangers when your city doesn't supply enough work to keep great characters in it, and those folks start to go out the other way. So every time I refer someone your way or Toby's way or Johnny Disco's way, it is in
keeping things here.
It's in a selfish pursuit of self-preservation and love for what that product is. Because if these folks aren't busy and fulfilled and compensated well enough for this, then we aren't going to have a leg to stand on.
It's true. Like, I always say something, it's not the right term, but I always call it like critical mass. Like, you need something there in order to make a living there, right? Like, if I'm one hell of a farmer and then I move to a city, it's like, okay, great, your skills are not very useful here.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's one thing that's a little bit challenging with Cincinnati, or challenging and not challenging. So, like, you can make a living doing music here. It might not be the most comfortable because of the pay rates or whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But you can make rent, and you can make groceries, and you can save for retirement doing music. I think from a technology perspective, if you're in AV, which is, I would say, music adjacent, it's actually very, very easy to get a living here because we have a lot of industry here. And one thing that's a little bit interesting too, there is a little bit of a push for online presence. You can get things done in different parts, but I'll say this, like, what I've seen lately is, like, again, I don't think he'd be happy with me naming them, but there's a really top-notch producer who moved back to Cincinnati recently. He was in New York for X amount of years. That's great. That's bringing more critical mass to Cincinnati. He made his connections with New York, and he said, peace out, I'm going back home, because I lived there first. And it's like, okay, that brings critical mass. I'm comfortable naming this guy because he's really, like, probably comfortable with me talking about him. There's a gentleman named Rob Podorf. He's a really great film scorer, okay? He was in, I believe, L.A. for X amount of years, then moved back to Lexington, Kentucky. So I think that I'd love to see more heavy hitters go out to these big cities and then kind of making it back to Cincinnati, because that does two things. And you can work remotely once you have those connections made. And I think more people should do that because, like, if you think about it, like, I'm taking advantage of this a little bit. I teach for a college in California. Who do you think pays their professors better, California or Ohio? Well, California does. So I think that, and I'm not trying to take away from your industry, but I think what more people should do, go out there, get the gigs, make your connections, stay there for 2 or 3 years, come back to Cincinnati. Then you have connections that you can build from Cincinnati and from here, and they can feed each other. That's two good things. And you can make LA money in Cincinnati. You can make Nashville money in Cincinnati, et cetera, et cetera. Because now, that being said, I don't want to paint a cherry, like, amazing picture, because, like, making a living in, like, a Nashville payday, a Nashville gig, it kind of depends on the gig, but, like, you got some people playing on, on the main drag and everything, and they're making like $100 a man or something like that. That happens sometimes.
Yeah. Now they are making almost 6 figures in tips a year.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is an IRS disaster, and God bless them for doing it. But one of the things that holds us back in this city that you see in larger towns like that is tourist traffic turning into genuine listeners. Like, the population of listeners that we have to pull on tends to be each other. The people in the top 10% are not gung-ho listeners. Like, there are some of those, and I point out the people at my shows directly, and I try to give them the value proposition of my love and affection, and hopefully something new to listen to and whatnot, and good events that they enjoy. Because, boy, they're hard to find.
Yeah.
But other musicians tend to get it a little bit more. I always tell people, like, of our parents' generation, everyone started off playing piano. Even if you fell off the rocker, it's like, you tried, and your appreciation of people doing that skill well that you failed at is profoundly higher than if you never took a chance.
Yeah.
And there's more folks in our generation that never took a chance, and therefore they don't appreciate the thing you're doing, which is not their fault. You just need to know your demographics well enough to ask things of them.
It's a little challenging, and this is another conversation to have on a different day probably, but I think people really appreciated music more back in the day, from a percentage point of view. Like, there's more people who listen to music now than there was before, but there's more people who appreciated from a percentage point of view back in the day what music was. Because back in the day, when I say back in the day, I'm talking like 20s, 30s, 40s. Almost most people did play an instrument to some degree. It was like one of the pastimes and all that stuff. A lot of houses would have, like upper income houses would have pianos and guitars. I think this is accurate from what I understand. And a lot of people could actually read music, because way back then, when you didn't have like records or anything, the way you bought music, you bought sheet music.
Yeah.
And then you'd either give it to someone to play or you'd play it. And then time and time went on, and school music got taken out of more and more schools. It became less and less of a priority. For some fucking reason, we're doing recorder in school. And so, like, you know,
the first fire we take of the day goes after the recorder. Thanks, Jake.
Well, there is objectively why people do it. It's easy for kids, and the fingerings translate better to wind instruments and all that stuff. But like, I really like it when schools are like, you know what, this year we're going to look at pianos a little bit, and this year we're going to look at usually not guitars but ukuleles or something like that. Now I'm being heavily biased right now because that's how Madison teaches her classroom.
Yeah.
But I've always felt that that's what we should do. Teach them the cool things, right? And then that helps them. It helps with two things. One, they're going to think music's cooler than a recorder, right? And two, they're also going to have more of an appreciation for when they go out and see someone. They're like, oh man, I tried to do that in grade school. I couldn't do that. That creates appreciation. That creates recognition of something that's very special. So, yeah, whole conversation to be had there. But yeah, I noticed that a lot in Cincinnati, and like, some people get mad at me when I say it. They might get mad at me when I say it here, but like, when you go to shows and concerts, which like I'm really bad about because I'm usually working on those nights. So I don't get to go out and see my friends a whole lot. Like, I think the most recent one I saw for fun was like Keith and John down at the Speakeasy. What's that place called?
Oh, Ghost Baby.
And then I got to see you at Urban a while ago. You know what I mean? That I really don't get to go out that much.
Yeah.
And because I usually work on those nights. And now there's a whole other balance thing, which we don't have to talk about, but I have this whole other epiphany now. Like, you know what? Family's really important. And now I'm hanging out with my family not my family, but both our families, Madison and I, on Saturdays and Sundays. And that's usually going to houses, not clubs or anything. And that's been another challenge too. Like, okay, because I've been telling myself for years, I got to go out and see more shows. Well, there's two things that involves now. Seeing my family less and doing less gigs. It's like, well, both of those things are important to me. So it's really challenging. I can make it work, I'm sure. I just haven't done a good job at it. And with my current schedule, I teach from 10:30 to 1 a.m. because I'm doing California evening classes. So that blocks all the weekdays right there. But anyways, when I've gone to shows, okay, and it depends on the show, and I think Ghost Baby's very, very special for one particular reason. I'll get into that. When I go to shows, and when I used to go to shows, you know what a majority of the crowd was? Other musicians in town. It's like, how sustainable is it if you're not drawing in the general public, you're drawing in other musicians? Not that other musicians aren't valuable, they are, but essentially it's almost, and again, don't take this like in a mean way, but it's almost kind of pyramid schemey, right? Like, everyone has to kind of support each other in order to get up, and that's fine, and that's everything. But how much more market, how much more external money, how much more external capital, how much more external sustainability is going to come in if it's just this pool of people that keeps coming out to shows? You got to get more people coming in. One thing that's cool about Ghost Baby is that's just like fancy people who can afford a really expensive drink coming to hang out in some space. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then you get, and I hate saying the word, but then you get exposure, and those people might come to another show, right? You should still pay your musicians. You should still do all that stuff. But we got to figure out how to break that freaking barrier. It seems like, you know, the people who go to Urban or the Comet or Arnold's, they're not regular lay people. They're musicians who want to see other music, which is good. That's good.
Yeah, you need those clubs where it feels like the community is there.
Yes,
but,
yes.
I think the thing you're talking about of like fan conversion needs to happen with the general public. And, you know, everyone has their own idea of how that works. For me personally, in Cincinnati, this is not the place where I can control the supply and demand. This is a place I make a living.
Yes.
So I'm a convenience product for you most of the time. You can find me on Sundays at Fishbowl. You can find me this weekend in 3 different places.
Yeah.
I want to be within 15 minutes of your home.
Exactly.
And that's when you're going to come see me. And I could care less if I can pull you out to another place because I'm not going to take that risk very often.
Yeah.
And when I do, I know there's a certain bubble that I'll take it. But in my touring markets, that's where I need to control the supply and demand of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, if I can only be here once a year, but I can sell your room out, you're worth it.
Yeah.
If I can come back here 3 times a year and I don't sell any tickets, this either isn't the city or it's not working out.
Yes.
The value proposition is not there. And thanks to the internet, I don't need to oversaturate. I can be there just enough to get this, and I can quantitatively gauge if you're going to be there or not. I'm not doing the best job of that right now, but it's an important thing to consider.
Yeah, it's one of those things, Matt, that drives me nuts when it comes to the musician lifestyle currently. So you're I'm not saying this so you feel this way, but you're feeling a little guilty, like I haven't been doing a good job of that now. It's like, well, dude, you're a songwriter and musician. Where in the hell is that in that job description? Is it marketer? You know what I mean? Like that's.
But I do have a marketing degree, you know.
Yes. Well, no, that's not even the point I'm trying to make. It's that there's so much that people don't recognize go into being a musician in that sense. That like you have to consider all these things, and some people are like, and there's also like a pompous mindset too with some people. Like, well, why you play there so often? You know what I mean? Because they haven't done that whole idea of like, you know, when I was playing in a band, we knew only to play Dayton very rarely so that we get a big crowd in Dayton. It's the same thing you were saying, like don't oversaturate your market because then you're going to get less and less turnout. The club doesn't care to have you then who cares to have you? So that's always a whole thing. But yeah, this whole, you have to be marketer, you have to be the social media, you have to do all this stuff.
You got to do the merchandising. It's like you really have to wear every single hat well enough. Yeah, to get anywhere with it.
Now, you have done a good job of putting together teams, too, right? Like, a lot of musicians, that's where the biggest trouble comes from is having the team. Like, I'm going to use this person for this person for this. Because you can only do so much in the hours of the day, right? Like, at the end of the day, like, don't spend the money you don't have, right? But if you're able to, it's probably good to outsource this to this person, outsource this to this person. And you have to find the right people, too. But and that's one of the things I'm doing too, which like, and this is something that is a little bit controversial too. But I've been using Musiversal. Have you heard of that company? Musiversal. I pay $300 a month for it, and they have these musicians that are part of the platform, and they're basically on-call musicians, and you can schedule a session with them and have them play on your tune. And I mostly use it for like strings and that kind of thing, and saxophone. To be blunt, like I'd hire other people for like some of the instruments, but a lot of the music I'm working on is like so simple. I don't need to do that. I use like either I can play the bass line, and I'm not a good bass player at all, but I can usually like, oh, I can do this, and then what I do, I go in and I correct it or whatever. In guitar, and I don't do piano. I usually have to figure that one out. But Musiversal was another thing too, because here's the other thing that's a little bit tricky is availability. Because now that I work gigs and musicians work gigs and my availability doesn't line up with other musicians' availability, it's kind of nice to have a service where it's like they have these full-time musicians and their whole thing is to sit in their, like you have a home studio, they would sit in their home studio and like you just go on their calendar and say, I want to use you for this time slot. And then they, okay.
Yeah.
And you do a Zoom meeting with them, you send them the session, they record directly to the session, they do usually 2 or 3 takes, and then they send it back to you. So.
And that helps us diffuse the what's the right term for it? When you have like the antitrust laws, like what do you call that when it's a large company that dominates that market?
Monopoly?
Yeah, the monopoly that certain cities have on it. It's like you can be a potato farmer that's bitching on the keys or lap steel, and you can do that from there. And anyone that has qualms with that hasn't done their due diligence in finding themselves the work that they're looking for. Like that's part of the pursuit in this is making sure that people understand what you're capable of and find the folks that can use that. It's like it's the same thing as finding a spouse. You need to find someone that sees in you the value. and if you can't, that is inherently on you. Like one thing.
It is controversial. I mean, so you probably know why it's controversial, but it is controversial because I don't hire local. It's like when you don't buy made in the USA. It's controversial because it's not in the USA. So I am hurting our market by using that service. I understand that, and I do like. I am having ethical qualms about it. But at the end of the day, it's like if let's say I need someone to do amazing trumpet work. Okay, there's 4 trumpet players in town who I would trust to do that. They're all badass. So what does that mean? They're all booked.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So it's a little bit tricky, and not many of them have homes. One of them does. Not many of them have home studios that are to a point where I trust them. This whole platform is about having like you have people who are full time that have a home studio that's up to quality to do stuff like that.
Yeah, and that encourages more folks to learn how to invest in that.
Yeah.
And the only ethical issue to me is, do the musicians get paid well enough?
I don't know. I've thought about that, and actually we have a there's a couple musicians in town who have applied but didn't get the job. So it's probably really competitive, which makes me think that like if it's really competitive, are they going to pay a whole lot? Because you know how that is. Like, let's say you have a job and you need someone to do it, and you have 10,000 applicants. Okay, that means there's a lot of people want to work it. They might not care how much it pays, right? That's one thing I get a little bit worried about with the payment there. Like, is it ethical? And like, I don't know. All the sessions on Musiversal are recorded, so I can't like directly ask them like, "Are you getting paid enough for what you do?"
Yeah.
Because like if they say no, they might get fired or whatever. At least I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't know. That's kind of tricky. I would assume that they get paid well enough, and like they're choosing to do it. But that's kind of an oxymoron because like it might be like, oh, this is the only way I make a living, so I have to get paid like garbage. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah, there's always interesting parts of it, and like. You can't be responsible for the actions and the choices of somebody else in certain aspects of it. And,
I am feeling it, though, without knowing what it is. But
yes.
I don't know. It's tricky.
One question I have for you before we start to wrap this up.
Sure.
So there's a band called Bleachers, and the producer of that band is Jack Antonoff, who has some great albums with Taylor Swift and Lorde, and he's kind of responsible for a big change in pop music and how it's produced.
Yeah.
And my friend Jordan is a huge fan of his and has always kind of kept me listening more and more. So listening to the progressions of his albums, this most recent one, what I really enjoyed about it is it felt like there was a layer of creativity reserved for the master track as a singular piece of manipulation. It's almost like some of the production was reserved for a one-line change of push and pull.
Okay.
And I don't really know how to describe that except for like some of like the filtering and some of the way the tracks, disintegrated or built up happened at a later stage than earlier intentions in the music.
Okay.
Have you found that when you receive tracks as a mix and master engineer that there's more creativity to be had than in the initial stages?
I don't like to quantify and question whether it's more or less, but there always is. And it depends on the song, but I would say that there is generally a lot of things that you can do to creatively enhance a song. Now, there's the stereotypical ones, like what's called a throw delay. You have the end of a verse, and it says, "Hello, my baby," whatever the heck it is.
Yeah.
So, like, that, that's a creative decision in and of itself. But there's other things, too. Like, we had one on the Big Crash. I can't remember what it was that I did in post. Something with a guitar solo. But like, there's creative decisions too, like that you can do in post all day. The tricky part is about them is knowing when they're appropriate. It's like, am I driving the car the right direction again? And so it depends on the artist. I can be hesitant or very strong-armed and like, I'm going to do this, and this, and this. You know what I mean? And that's not, you have, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but like, you have pillars of mixing. You have like frequency balance. Everything has its own home frequency-wise. Volume balance. The priorities are correct. Panning, which I really could give less of a shit about because most of the things happen in mono now anyways. But like, panning, making sure everything has a home. Like, but then, so after those pillars, right, you have those things, and forgot reverb and delay to creating the appropriate space. Anything above that is like your sprinkles. You know what I mean? And that stuff in certain genres is actually like sometimes more important than the pillars, which I get castorized for saying that, but like that's something that's more important. In certain genres, if you listen to like Bon Iver, like some of his early albums, not really well mixed, but all the fun special stuff he did, okay, that sold it. You know what I mean? It's really creative. Passion Pit, same kind of thing, like very well mixed, but what made that song like Let Her Go very special? Think about how big some of these elements are coming in. He starts off nice and thin, and then it comes into a verse and it's like boom, 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 boom. It's doing those big bass things, and that's something that like a lot of mix engineers would be like, that's a little bit too much of a dynamic difference or whatever. It's like, okay, it doesn't really. What serves the song is sometimes the sprinkles more so. So depending on the genre, the sprinkles are what you're calling the post-production creativity. That can be more or less. If I'm doing something that's like Snarky Puppy, and then if I'm doing some of those kind of fusion things or something that's really intricate and the performance itself stands on its own, or classical music stands on its own, make my job plain and vanilla as hell, because they're already Sprinkle City, right?
Yeah.
Like, but if it's something where it's like, I want all the fun stuff. I want you to put flanger on things and chorus this and give me like triple delays and detune, like do all this fun stuff. That's going to be like much more of a creative process in post than it is in the recording.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting to see that, and I think there's a lot of DJ influence, that production elements are reserved for the end goal.
Yeah.
And to see songwriters make that conscious decision to leave things a little more sparse, knowing that this is where it's most highly effective, where you look at something like a Steely Dan, where it's like the sprinkles are really intentional from the very beginning.
Yes.
This is what's going to make this part. And I don't think it's all music is moving towards that direction, but it seems to be where a lot of the macro is changing towards.
Yeah, a lot of, we call it, I'm sure there's a ton of names for it. I call it ear candy, right? Like, it's something that's very fun, and the listener, like, the way I kind of think of it is, how, like, I don't know, do you play a lot of video games?
No.
You don't? So, like...
I got a Switch, I do a little Rocket League-ing, but that's about it.
So Rocket League's not a good example for this. But, like, some people will play video games over and over again. Like, there's this game I played a lot called The Legend of Zelda, like, Ocarina of Time, and, like, you play through it once, it's fun. You play through it a second time, well, you're doing the same thing again. Why is it fun to do it a second time? Well, there's other little things you didn't notice the first time. Third time, fourth time, fifth time. Same kind of thing. I try to do that with mixing to a certain degree. You can't stuff that envelope too much. But I like it when someone listens to a song and they listen to it again and they have that same emotional thrill and everything, but they also get a little extra candy because they like, the first time I didn't realize that they had this cool little delay here. People don't think that. They don't think cool little delay.
Yeah.
They just think like, oh, I didn't hear it the first time. That's all they really think.
Yeah.
And then they go through and they're like, there's that really like slick little guitar line in the second verse. I never noticed that. And like at some point the mixing engineer has to make a decision. That guitar line, is that supposed to be big and prominent so it's heard every time? Or is that going to be ear candy where that's valuable on the third listen through for your repeat listeners? Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of that going on, I think, where you try to sprinkle in those sprinkles so that they're uncovered, not the first listen, second listen, but the third listen through. And that's a hard conversation sometimes to communicate with certain people. And like, so like, let's say I mix a song and there's like this amazing, like cool little piano riff, whatever it is towards the end. And I bury it a little bit, right? And then they are like, can you make that a lot louder? I'm like, yeah, sure. And I make it a lot louder and like, make it very obvious. I pull down all the elements, I EQ it so it's poking and that kind of thing. And then I try to get in their ear about like, do you mind if we like, I want you to A-B it and everything. But what's tricky about A-Bing things, how many times you listen to it? Once, right?
Yeah.
So the value is not on the re-listening. And that's a really hard thing to communicate because they want, like, I don't want to like negatively talk about it, but like the objective sometimes is not in, and there's truth to be had on both sides. Like I like this whole re-listen value. Some people don't want the re-listen value. They want to hook, line, sinker, get someone to listen to the first time and love it.
Yeah.
And then they want to come to my concert when I sell out or whatever. But I like that re-listen value stuff. So sometimes we got to get the goals aligned. But there's sometimes intentional reasons why you might have something be not as obvious. You might want to have that be like, hey, this might be a fun thing for him to realize on the second listen.
Yeah, but to say like we should have musical side quests that's
kind of what I think of it
as you've enjoyed this, like maybe if you read the BGVs without looking at the rest of the song, there's a subliminal line of what's going on here, like really complicated shit that
you reverse the audio and it's some Illuminati message or something.
Listen, they all are, okay, my entire catalog, and it's not good messaging, but I'm telling you, boy. No, but I think you're so right. Like, and it's hard to envision what is the first listen for this like, because you're on 215.
Yeah, that's true too. I've listened to the song way too many times, right? Yeah. to really have an idea of what a first listen is. I can keep it in objective goals, but I'm not going to know how it hits every time, right?
Yeah.
I have a pretty good idea. But.
And maybe that's one of the good things to be said about doing a passive mix the first time is you are riding on the energy of the first listen. One thing that Toby said to me last time that I love is, I'm going to listen through it and try to find the thing that makes it special, and then I'm going to ride that line through this entire song. So that is the first listen journey. Now, are the subliminal layers starting to get that same kind of attention and crafting?
Yeah, Toby and I probably have very similar mindsets. He's very much, he's got some things that he does a lot different than I do, but like probably same principles. I would assume. But like when I first listen to a song, let's say you send me something. X amount of tracks, pull it in. The first thing I do is I do a rough balance. I go to a chorus and balance it. When I say balance, I mean make it tolerable to listen to. Because if you have everything at 0, it's like
it's not.
It's not. Yeah, so then I move things around to make it like, okay, this sounds like a song. And then I go back to beginning and I do my stupid little pen and paper thing, and I write down kind of like there's kind of 3 things I look at. I go to the beginning. And the first thing I want to write down is like, what works even with poor mixing, like even with just this rough balance. It's like, okay, that guitar part, goosebumps. Like that's what we want to make like in the spotlight. Keep on writing through. That verse, we want to make that sparse because it works super fine on its own. And I'm writing down like what works. That's part 1. Part 2 is reference, but that's not as sexy because what reference is basically like, how do I make it industry standard? Because you got to play that fine line. Like, it has to work in a playlist, If I want to hear this song and I want it to sound like it's in a Dave Matthews playlist, those 2 things got to blend to some degree. I don't copy the Dave Matthews mix. That's not objectable either.
But there's got to be some congruency here.
Yes, and especially when it comes to the mastering phase. So a reference track is something else I come up with after the first listen. The third thing is very non-sexy. Freaking go into Pro Tools and put the song parts in. That's a verse. That's a chord. Rather than being like, I think it's at minute 2 something. Like it's not an efficient way to work.
Yeah.
But the first thing you want to make sure is that you know what's working without a reference. Because like that's something that people do. And I'm not trying to criticize anyone, but they'll be like, it's a punk rock song. We got to make the guitars loud as hell. It's like, well, listen to the song first, jackass. Like that might be like something else completely different. So it's and listen to it without a reference too. That's why one thing like. And I think I've done this with you. I can't quite remember, but oftentimes I'll ask for a reference track, and some people don't give it to me. That's fine. I'll usually come up with one on my own after the first listen. But even when they give me a reference track, I actually try to make very stringent point on not listening to that reference track until after my first listen through of this song, because I want to get that organic like, oh, that's what they kind of want. Now it is a little bit of a bummer sometimes, because I can't trick my mind into not remembering what something sounds like. Like I had someone give me a track to mix, and their reference track was Driver's License by Olivia Rodrigo, which like is a guilty pleasure. I love that song. Really great production on the bridge and everything. So, and I'm like, I already know what that song sounds like. So now I have to try to approach this from a different bias. What's going to be challenging. What I've done before is I look up like what songs are like that I haven't heard and make that my reference track, and then pull in the Olivia Rodrigo song. And then listen to the first time and see if I can get some objective decisions made on what works for the song. But yeah, that's really important to figure out like what makes this song unique and what makes it work. Because if you don't, you're basically trying to be a factory, right? And there's nothing wrong with being an efficient factory, but like if you want it to be unique and different and you want to sell it as a different product, you do need to have that variation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Long answer, I'm sorry.
No, it was a great answer. Anything you want to plug before we wrap up today?
I don't think so, no. Just, I would say there was something I had written on here. Oh, yeah. Don't feel guilty about not, like, this is so far back into the podcast, but, like, don't feel guilty if, like, you've identified your whole life as a guitar player, engineer, teacher, whatever that, nurse, you've self-identified with that as your career thing, and that's your part of your identity. Don't feel guilty from wanting to get away from that if it's causing you stress, because at the end of the day, your happiness is what's really, really important. So don't feel guilty about like, oh, I sunk 20 years into this. Who cares? If you're not liking it, get out. So that's a quick little plug.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Well, I think when it comes to the friends that serve as resources and fuel and just general company for what this journey is, you're one of the best of them, Jake. And I appreciate the hell out of you. All right, players, thanks for watching The Weekly Wave. This is Jake Richter. We'll catch you soon. Peace.